Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Audit Committee members, management staff, Peter who's on Zoom, and our representative from our external audit from Galp's, Julian. So welcome everyone today. So we'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. I think we've got a full attendance, no apologies, no motions to grant leave of absence, no leave of absence, no non-attendance. So declarations of interest in relation to the... Oh, David's not here. Is he turning up? Okay, we'll record him if he attends. If he doesn't, we'll record him as an apology. Thanks. Okay, so declarations of interest in relation to the matters before us today. Are there any declarations? I think there's a form that we would need to complete if there is one. So, thank you. Information of minutes of our last meeting on the 17th of August, 2021. Any changes, amendments? If not, a mover and a seconder for those minutes, please. Thanks, Natalie. Seconded. All in favour? Okay, carried. Business arising from those minutes are captured within our agenda today. So the first agenda item is our draft 2021 general purpose financial statements, and you will have noted that we got an updated set sent today. Is that correct? No, was it? Yeah. So again, happy. Now we've got three parts. We're going to look at the statements. We've then got the audit completion report from Galpin's and the management representation letter. So let's do the financial statements first. And Rakesh, over to you to take us through them, or are you happy with what you put on there for just comments from the
I'm happy with what's there in the statements, and happy for Juliano if he wants to raise anything.
Raise in relation to the audit, or? Oh, yes.
Well, let's hang on. So let's do the statements first. So I'll go around with the committee, ask them if they've got any questions, comments they want to make around the updated statements that was presented to us. So open it up to the committee.
Just a quick question. I might miss something. The late adjustment. Why did we have a late adjustment?
Thanks, Natalie. So the late adjustment was due to the financials that we did not receive from the NOMA and other body. Yeah. So, and I think like Aaron in her email has mentioned that because we didn't have the updated figures of the equity of council and, you know, like their yearly profit and loss. So that's why that late adjustment has been made to the financials.
So just to follow up then from that, did Norma give any reason as to why their statements were that late?
I think they didn't have their board meeting till last Friday.
I can't say why, but I can say that we have passed the annual report that's qualified. It's got a note on it.
Is it? So there's a qualification on this?
Essentially there is, yep.
Okay.
But I can't talk about it.
Okay.
Yep.
Hang on, Natalie.
Just quickly, does that work in Canada?
We'll ask our lawyer.
Yeah.
So Juliana, so what happens? So given that we've just found that could be a qualification on the NORMA statements, as equity accounted within council statements. Oh. Oh yeah, that big qualification word. It's wow. It wakes up the ministers as well. So. Okay, thanks.
Paul, sorry, Peter.
Yep. Yes, Peter, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to grab attention a bit far away, I know. I couldn't hear anything that Paul said. I think it was Paul said there. I'm not sure if he had his microphone off, but the volume is not very good for picking up the voice discussion in the chamber there. I don't know if that can be adjusted somehow.
Can we ask our technical crew over to the left of me?
Did Paul have his microphone off? Was that the issue then?
Oh, I saw the red light on. You had your red light on. We'll talk now. Let's test Paul now.
Yeah, okay. Norma.
I can hear now. Good.
Okay, yeah, I'll just go through it. Norma delayed passing its annual report.
It's gone off now.
There we go. Okay, it's working.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's-
Norma delayed accepting or passing its annual report because of certain reasons. And we have passed that, but there's a note in there which talks about why.
Right.
I can't talk about that.
Okay.
It's not
Right.
a qualification. It's an issue.
Yeah.
It's not fun. It's just an
Okay.
issue.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Then
All right.
So my question then will come back to if it was the annual report and so was it the statements in the annual report or was it the annual report itself?
The chair couldn't sign it because of a reason.
Couldn't sign the financials?
Yes, the financial statement for a reason,
Okay.
and that's been, I suppose, resolved.
So again, so then the question comes back again, and I'll encounter this with every other council that have got subsidiaries that are equity accounted. I think there's the onus on those subsidiaries to really let management here know there's going to be a hold up. And again, was there any other communication for you all to know that it was? So I think, Paul, as the board director on Norma, I think you need to take.
Yes, I will. It was brought to councillors and senior management. It's an issue. I can't talk about that. Yeah.
Peter?
Yep.
I presume that the statements that we did receive have been audited and by the auditor of Norma.
Yep.
And therefore we're relying on the audited statements of Norma to consolidate into the to equity account into the Gawler's figures. Am I right in assuming that?
Yep, I think it is, but Paul.
Yes, it was. The auditors have looked at the board's statement and have accepted it and accepted the finances, but with that one little note.
Okay, so it might be an interesting issue, but it doesn't really affect our consideration of Gawler's financial statements, really.
Probably not, no. The Norma problem.
Yep, fair enough. Thank you.
Karen?
So just to clarify, the chair hasn't signed off on the financial statements. Did I hear that correctly?
Originally, no, and he has now, and the board has signed off on it after
Putting this note in there.
yeah, after we put the note in. Yes. Yep. So
Okay.
Yes, they are signed now. Because there was a real hold up.
So, and my question is, have you had a chance, Juliana, to see that note, that statement, or have you just taken the numbers from the equity side and it's put in our notes? So have you all actually had a chance to see their statements?
We got the statements and then we look at the figures and the auditors report from HLB, isn't it?
Yep.
The auditors, and
HLB,
then
yep.
have like an overall look to the financial statements. But that specific note, I need to know what that is exactly. So was there like a no disclosure that wasn't that before? Because you look at the financials, there's nothing that would indicate that would be a problem for Goller.
It was within the signed financial, the sign off from the chair.
Okay, so it's the actual, I know what it is.
Yeah.
So it's the declaration.
Yes, the declaration,
Okay,
yeah.
They put something in there. You know, how
Yes.
normally it says, you know, we've prepared
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
financial statements. We believe that
Yeah,
we're,
yeah.
yes, as and when they
Yeah,
fall
there
due.
was something there that would not sign till we did something else, and there was happy to sign it, and there's a note in there on that declaration.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
So I'm sure, well, and I think the councillors will get a full copy of that
Yeah,
declaration. So
yeah. So it's in the
again,
declaration.
maybe Lakesh, when you do receive a copy, and Giuliano, just have a look and see whether that's going to have any impact on this at this point. That's all we can do
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Yeah, anyway.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on the statements?
Peter?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly in the statement of comprehensive income, there's a big physical resources received free of charge of 36 million. It's a fairly lumpy one. I presume
You have
that's
a page you can.
that would be page 4 of the accounts, or page 7 of the agenda.
Yep.
Or the attachments, I guess. So it's a statement of comprehensive income and physical resources received free of charge, $36 million. Is that the Gawler Link Road that we're talking about there?
Yes, that's the Galleries Link Road.
Right, okay. And Juliana was talking to us earlier, Lakesh, about a bit of a struggle in trying to get that data ready for putting in the statements. Can you explain when was the asset handed over? And I presume there's only a small portion of depreciation that's incorporated into this year's statements because of the late acknowledgement or receipt of the asset. Is that correct?
Yes, so I can explain to the chair.
Yep.
So what has happened is the asset was commissioned and handed over in October 2021, but it wasn't commissioned in our books till 2020, October 2020. But
20.
it wasn't identified in our books till this audit date, till late September. And the
Right.
reason why there was a difference was because there was the information that was given by DIPTI, Department of Transport and Infrastructure, in regards to the dollar amounts of capitalization, but they did not provided us with the lengths of the road and particular assets about footpaths and other things. So our asset delivery team, which was understaffed at that time, did not find enough resources to capitalize it, but at the end they reached there. And in regards to the depreciation, we had no intention of removing the depreciation from the books. So initially when the books were prepared, the council allowed for 500,000 worth of depreciation based on the value that department has given us. Whereas when all the exercise was done to capture the actual cost, that came under the price of the capital of the value that department has given us. So that also impacted our depreciation. It brought it down and increased our surplus. So currently, like, our surplus is sitting at about 230, about 233
Yeah,
as per updated after Norma. So yeah, and there was about 35, 36 grand of difference just because of taking the right value of Gawler East Link Road into our books. Hope
right.
that explains, Peter.
Thank you. And could I just follow up in that the depreciation is prorated, is it, from October to June? So next year there'll be a higher figure based on a 12-month.
Yes,
period.
and
Is that correct? Yep.
yes, that's the case, and we have allowed for the correct amount of depreciation. We would be allowing the correct amount of depreciation in our budget. So that's all going to be fairly covered in that sense.
Okay. All right. And just finally, I think Juliana is going to provide us with some commentary on the processing of assets, collecting the data. Given that it was October that the asset was handed over, there's a long period of time that the asset group, and I'm sure they're understaffed and it's a big job, but there needed to be some sort of effort. Apparently it happened at the last minute, and obviously that needs to be taken care of during the year before you get to a last minute Melbourne Cup run to get the thing signed. So is that being taken on board in terms of Gawler's response to this issue?
So Henry, can I just say, so again, can we leave that, because we've got the audit completion report to be discussed soon after these.
Oh, you want to discuss? Okay, yeah.
So
All right.
we'll leave that till that part of the agenda
Okay.
comes up. So we're still dealing with the numbers and the statements.
Yep.
And then the auditor will respond with his report, and then we'll raise those issues, including the one that we discussed in camera.
Okay.
Are there any other around the numbers, around the notes to the accounts? Natalie?
Sorry, just meant to be a quick question. So with the road, is there, if you look in the Department of Transport's financial statements, like, is there a corresponding number that the Auditor General signed off on? It's from one asset to the asset transferred, so the numbers should reconcile. And I know that in state government they have to go through a whole lot of process in order to value the assets before they hand them over. Have you sort of confirmed with the Auditor General or with the transport auditors?
Look, the GPT is a massive department, and I can tell you because I was in a secondment with the Auditor General doing some work for GPT. So generally, the GPT financial statements got some massive numbers. They wouldn't have anything like separated for, oh, this is Gawler East Link. You know what I mean? They'll have like a whole bunch of figures there. So it's not something that would easily identify in the financial statements, and probably for us to ask the Auditor General to do that wouldn't be like a number that would pops up. They would have to dig their general ledger transactions and separate what's Gawler, what's whatever else to get that figure. So, and then even though if they could, I don't think that's is not necessarily the right figure for Gawler, because what the model financials require is for Gawler to record at fair value, which they did, to record at fair value based on your unit rates, on the measurements and your unit rates. So that wouldn't give us the answer anyway. So.
Welcome, David. No, it's okay. Okay, any other questions in relation to the statements and the notes to the accounts? Can I raise one? And I've been doing this for the other council committees I've sit on. I'm just thinking about it, and this prompted me because with Onka Paringa and their new financial system that they're putting into play, they've actually treated that as an intangible asset. And I note in every council's, everyone's got, Tech One and all these financial systems, but no one treats them as an intangible asset. They just pay a fee every year for using that asset. But again, I'm asking and I've asked this of the other auditors as well as about why we don't treat those as intangible assets. And my understanding is the way you treat it is so who's your financial system with this? Who do you all use? Civica. So if you've signed a 7-year agreement with Civica to use their financial system with a view of, again, re-signing it for another 7 years, the way the standard says that you're meant to treat that as an intangible asset because it's software that you're using from the cloud, and then you just amortize it over 7 years. Now, I think what you're doing is you're paying your annual fee every year, correct? And you're treating it as it's the same effect. But what I'm saying is, but a true reflection in your statement should say, we've got intangible assets and we're amortizing. It's not going to affect the bottom line at all. All you're doing is you're going to have something on your balance sheet because you've made that signed a commitment. You've got an intangible asset of 7 years worth, and then you amortize it. Because that's what you're doing when you're signing up with the Cedica, is that you're saying we want 7 years at this yearly rate to have the software. We amortize it, intangible asset, amortize it over 7 years. So again, and I've spoken, I think to Tim about this when he was at Adelaide Hills, when he came to do their statements. And again, he said, well, it's here nor there, but I said, I'm going to leave it to between council. I mean, if council want to show those numbers on their books, it's up to council. It's up to the auditor to say whether it's true and fair. So that was that one. Can I also ask another one here? We have the one on page, so this is page, under leases, note 17. And we have this thing underneath called investment property. Now, again, I just want to know whether it's properly classified or whether the note should be called investment property. So I understand you'll receive rent in relation to investment property. What's your investment property?
So we've got, I think there's about 10 of them on my list. So like we've got like the Faster Pasta site, we've got the Caravan Park, we have got the accountant's office on Reed Street, which I think is called Cunningham's. And there's a couple other smaller ones that off the top of my head I can't think of. Yeah, correct.
Okay,
yep,
so
downstairs at the admin, that's right. So, and there's a couple other smaller ones as well.
okay, so you'll do own investment properties. Okay. Well, and key management personnel. So there is no other related party transactions. So no one in council sit on boards or other things that would impact these statements. So, are you all members of other boards or committees externally where you'll then procure services, goods or anything? There's nothing of that, because that's something, as Julian, you've seen in another statements where that's happened. So there's nothing, or you'll just haven't reported that for it to be disclosed. That's all I just want to know, because I see that in every other council that I sit on, where councillors, the CEO, if he sits on a on an external body, it's got to be reported on there.
One thing that needs to be clarified is that I think Goller sent the declaration forms to the KMPs, right? And then usually there's a process to send a declaration form to the KMPs, so they return a form declaring if they sit in a board or something like that. So there's one thing that needs to be clarified, and I know a lot of councils get confused with that. It's not the case here. Is that for you to sit in a board, that's not enough for you to. That doesn't necessarily fit. Agrees with the accounting standards. What the accounting standard says is that you have control over that entity. So you must be a KMP and control. So for an entity to be in the note, that entity must be controlled by a KMP. So if you are, let's say, in a committee of a sporting club, and then you have like 10 other members, and then you just one member, so you don't control that. So that's what the standard says, the related party standard says about it.
Correct. And Juliana, and I know that, and what I'm saying is that the other councils might note all that down and say, and however, these members who are on these do not have control over these organisations to influence council. So all I'm saying is that every council notes it, and here's one council, and again, it's all about perception, it's about reputation, and they're saying, what are they hiding from us? Why does Gawler not put this information in? So again, I'm only asking the question, if the information is there, to be put down with the note that members and being on these boards and bodies does not constitute control.
So for example, I'm on the Greater Adelaide Regional Council, which is a committee of the LGA. Now, council does business with the LGA. However, I certainly don't control the LGA. But I take your point, is there a need to be super transparent so that you can see where these key personnel are sitting, and whether and people can make up their own minds. Now, it's not,
Well,
it's not technically required. However, I do take your point.
and the point being, what I'm saying, Karen, is that the information is there. It's not like now someone's got to spend the next 20, 30 days getting this information. It's all on that declaration statement. It's about whether you want to take that. And again, I'll leave it to council to make that call. It's your statements. It's not the audit committee. So I'm just providing some information that I'm noting in other councils' financial statements. David?
The Gawler Flood Management Authority, probably the NORMA, the Northern Adelaide Waste Management Authority, we're an active part. So yeah, I think those members would have put that on their forms. So I think it would be important to note those too, for sure.
Just one more clarification. I gave you that context. It's not because I oppose to that. It's just more for me as an auditor, informing my opinion. This is no showstopper for me. But I don't oppose council to include those memberships or being member of committees. So it's,
Thank you. So Aaron, would that be a big task to get that information, to just add that onto note 20?
Through the chair, no.
Okay. Thank you. We're all for me from the statements. So any other questions? No, Peter, you're okay from?
Yep.
Okay, so let's now move on to the Galpin's management letter, the final management letter. So they've given us a summary of their work that they've done, all the risk areas, what they've found, and there was one final issue that they raised in their final management letter, but I think Juliana's going to talk about another issue, which I understand he's already spoken to in detail with management about.
okay. So I usually start saying that the reason why we're here for. So we're here for two reasons. So not everybody knows that is not the case, but it's really important to highlight the scope. So we're here to provide a controls opinion. So that's when we come here in February to do the internal controls tests and to substantiate our controls opinion. And a draft of our controls opinion is provided on the appendix 2 of the report. And we also here to provide our opinion on the financial statements. And that's when you come here in October to perform the substantive procedures and to perform the final verification of the financial statements. So that's the scope of our final visit. Perhaps I'll just quickly revisit our controls opinion tests, and probably I would invite you to go to page 74 of the agenda, which is page 12 of our report. So I need to tell you whether or not council complying all material aspects of section 125 of the Local Government Act under the Local Government Financial Management Regulations we need to benchmark our internal controls against the better practice model. The better practice model is a list of over 300 controls. So that's why we adopt a risk-based approach to reduce the number of 300 controls to a number of controls you would expect to see in place for a council like Town of Golar. And after adopting that risk-based approach, we selected 100 core controls that we would expect to see in place here. I think it's important to mention that when the controls opinion was created, we sort of like changed the way we report our findings or the results of our controls opinion tests. So that's why we include this table here to provide you more context on how council comply with section 125 or in relation to the level of effectiveness of council's internal controls. So if you look at the table, council had 92 controls operating effectively out of 100, which indicated a high level of compliance of section 125. We usually classify our councils into 3 categories. So we have the bottom category, which are the councils we qualify the opinion. We have a couple this year. We have the mid category, which are the councils that just made the cut. And then we have the top category, that's where Golar is. So those are the councils that demonstrated a high level of compliance of section 125 and a high level of effectiveness of internal controls. During the final audit, we look at how they're going with the findings from the interim audit, and they have addressed some of the findings. So next financial year, we're probably expecting a higher number of controls operating effectively. So next financial year, we see like a column for the 21-22 financial years. Then you'll be able to monitor how council is progressing in terms of effectiveness of internal controls. So after our interim tests, so we concluded that we're going to issue an unmodified controls opinion, which means a clear controls opinion. And again, a draft of our opinion is on the appendix 2 of the report. So let's talk about the final audit. When you come here to look at the financial statements and perform our substantive procedures, we came here in early October. I think we had a draft financial statements ready for us. I think finance management was mostly ready for us. We have all the documents, reconciliations, all done and dusted for us. It was good. One thing we noted here is that, I think I mentioned in the in-camera session, but I'll say that again, is that finance management seems to be on top of the main variances on the financials. And then usually when you look at the financials and you look at the variances, we expect a story to be told based on the variances on the financials. If that story matches what happened with the council throughout the financial year, then is a first good indication that the financial statements are fairly presented. So that was really good. So we had one thing that was a bit of challenge this financial year was in relation to the capitalization of the Golar East link road. So when you come here for the audit, the first draft of the financials had a estimated depreciation, but no corresponding assets on note 7. That was the first draft. And obviously that, then I had 2 questions for that. One was why was that estimated depreciation rather than an actual depreciation, since the asset was commissioned in October 20 and was the basis for the calculation. So then after that, we obtained a spreadsheet from GPT, which then that was capitalized. Then you had an internal meeting at Galpins, and then we decided that that spreadsheet was not telling us the answers. There was not a sufficient evidence for us to form an opinion on the Golar East Link Road. And then we decided to sort of like issue a limitation of scope. But then after that, asset management did like an intensive work to get all the drawings from Gypsy, and based on the drawings, they collect all the measurements of the roads and all the stormwater assets, bridges, and all the assets, value those assets based on the unit rate included in the asset master file for similar assets. And then after that work was done, we did a fair bit of tests to look at those drawings and sort of like to compare those measurements with the drawings. And then after we did that, we were comfortable with the value. And then we sort of like are confident that the value is fairly presented and the note 7 is fairly presented. Perhaps looking ahead in future, perhaps could be a good learning experience for us to, when we have those big projects like Golar East Link, perhaps we can plan the resources and to make sure we have that on a timely, that capitalized and included in the register on a timely manner. So that was the only challenge we had this year. Yeah, but after we performed our audit, so we are the opinion that the financial statements are fairly presented, and the draft opinion is on the appendix 1 of the audit completion report. So we providing a clear opinion, in other words.
It's non-modified opinions.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Giuliano. So, Henry, just for your information, so this was raised in our in-camera, and what we've recommended, and Galpins have agreed to it, so they'll reissue this management letter with a second final management finding around this whole issue about the East Link and the way, because again, it's got to be what they found and what they're recommending, so that this doesn't happen again and other bigger assets are coming on the book. So we need to then get management to respond, and who's going to be responsible and by what date. And it'll be captured the same way as the internal audits are now. You've got an action plan. There's all the findings, recommendation, who's going to do what and when, and we'd like that to be, say, external audit should be that action plan as well. Separated internal audit, external audit. So that'll happen, Juliana. When you reissue that, can the audit committee maybe be circulated a copy out of session just for our records and completeness as well? Okay, so any questions of Giuliano sorry, Henry, you want to?
Yeah, if I could respond. So it certainly has been a disappointing process to get to where we are, in that this asset has been planned and replanned and quantified and requantified to the nth degree. And we have been badgering DIT to get the information that we've been needing, and they just wouldn't provide it. And so I think a month or so ago, when this matter was brought to my attention relative to the potential for a qualified audit, and I was briefed by Sam and Rakesh, and I basically told them to stop doing what they're doing and follow up with DIT, get the information that they need in a format that they need, and recalibrate the data such that we're in the position that we don't have a qualified sort of statement. But just to be absolutely clear for all the members, that this has been on our radar for a long time, and we just have not had any pleasure with DIT. And also just to be clear that, as the members around the table know, that the level of analysis and the review of data and the plans that we've been looking through, and all the field work that we've done relative to ensuring that the quality of work is to our standards, such that there's a high level of corporate knowledge, but we just couldn't get the information that we needed from the department, which is very frustrating.
Thanks, Henry. And again, I just wonder whether in instances, again, going forward, the same thing happens again, is whether it might take the mayor to maybe make a call to the minister to just emphasise the qualifications that could follow, and that the council doesn't want to be qualified because of a department that is just refusing to release information. That's the type of stuff that they don't want to see in the front page of the advertiser. And I think they'll give it to you very, very quickly. Yeah, just.
I think it's really disappointing that it took a threat of a qualified audit for staff to drop everything and get it. If they weren't providing it for, what, 6 months, 4 months, 1 month, whatever it was, and then all of a sudden they do provide it. I just think that's very disappointing. And I would have liked to have known about it because, yeah, maybe some political pressure could have made it a bit easier for everyone.
So, any other questions on the report? Again, obviously the one other key one which we're finding in most, not just councils, but I think every organisation, is this whole leave balances and, you know, the levels of it. I mean, to have 16 staff with over 2 years accumulation of 2 years of accumulated annual leave, that is a lot. So again, my question would be, and I'm sure, Henry, you and your management team are putting leave plans in place and getting it now. I know I get answers where people saying, yeah, but you know, there's been border lockdowns and we can't travel. That's not the reason for why you get annual leave. Is to take a break, recharge, and you can do that in your backyard. You don't have to always get on a plane or get on a train or do anything to travel interstate or overseas. I mean, the leave plans or your provision of leave, which I think in Australia is very generous, should be used for what they were actually initially struck in legislation.
I mean, I think in some ways, local government, state government being sort of sheltered in a lot of the COVID work, because I know a lot of people, all their lockdowns, they had to use their annual leave, they had to use all their leave. A lot of our community don't have any leaves left because of COVID, unfortunately. And yeah, I think it's a bad look as well. So I think it's really important that people use their leave for their own health and well-being as well. So it's all part of all of that, which is very important.
So what is the strategy to, what is it, the 16 staff that have got 3 years leave each? What is the strategy to turn that around?
Well, for the last couple of years, this has been on our radar, and it's been a focus of conversations with the executive team, where we managers do talk to the staff who have excessive leave, that there is an annual plan of commitment to take leave that's been in place. Sort of the COVID hasn't been an excuse from our perspective. So, you know, there has been a concerted focus to bring that number down, and it has been higher over the last number of years, and it's still high, but we have been focusing on and pushing staff to take leave. There has been pushback in terms of effectively staff not wanting to take leave because of the workload issues and a whole raft of other things. However, we've certainly pressed the point, and we have a fairly detailed process whereby we understand the leave entitlements. The managers talk with the staff involved, and they plot the leave accordingly. But I accept that there are numbers that are still too high, particularly for 16 staff that we have referenced.
Peter?
The question is there an actual cap on how much toil and flexi and stuff like that staff can actually accrue? Because that's quite high as well.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's in the EA. A lot of EVs tend to, because that's the directive that you can force staff to say maximum you can have is 8 weeks. You're holding 16 or whatever it is. Flexi is more a policy, isn't it? That you've got in.
can, say health, we've got to take it within the pay period. Otherwise we lose it.
Yeah. Peter, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just on the leave issue, Gawler's no orphan in relation to this. Just about every audit committee I'm on, this report comes up as well. It needs to be kept an eye on, but it's not I don't think, in my view, it's not the biggest issue, facing council, so to speak, but it just needs to be kept an eye on and keep getting it down as much as you can within the constraints of the work environment.
I think Peter, the key there, it's not an issue from a financial right now.
No.
All it's going to take is one of the employees to cite burnout, and that look at the leave that I've just accumulated. I've just been working and working and working. Then it becomes a reputational, a litigation risk, and the list will go on and on.
Mm.
It is.
Needs to be watched, that's no.
And it's also as far as fraud risk goes as well. Even if you've got the big lead balances, you might want to do a review of which areas they're in. It's a high level overview, because a lot of, like, say, the banks force their employees to have at least 2 weeks leave a year, as far to make sure that someone else takes over their role for a couple of weeks in case, they're doing something untoward. And that's why it's a high risk for, it comes up in the audit reports. Mention that.
Oh, Henry wanted to say something. Henry, please.
Well, it's just reiterating the comment that I made earlier. If that we do consciously, with the executive team, a briefing from our HR department, we have a register. We identify the staff that have got excessive leave. We, not force, but strongly encourage leave being taken. We get regular reports, but this is just another flag for me to make sure I get back to the executive team accordingly and re-elevate what's already on the way.
Thank you, Henry. Karen, did you? No? Okay, any other questions from the audit end of year report? No, if not, can we then just have a look at the management representation letter? So this is the letter that goes from Henry back to the auditors, emphasising, because they are responsible for preparing the statements, and there are some very key statements that Henry has signed off on behalf of council in relation to the preparation of the statements, and it's this letter that then allows councillors to sign their audit report. So questions on that? I think this is a standard letter that I think actually the audit firm provides to management, and if they want to add anything more, they can, if they want to take anything out. So are you all happy with the letter, Juliana? Yep.
When I'm talking code, the issue at Norma, is that something that may reflect this declaration? Okay, thank you.
It's normal report. I won't sleep tonight. Karen, did you? No, nothing. Okay. So we've dealt with item 6.1, and we've got the 5 recommendations. So the first one is that we, subject to those adjustments,
Is it better to say subject to any minor variations, or subject to adjustments as discussed?
and it should be, well, it's actually, well, just subject to variations requested by the audit committee and external auditors. So it's requested by the audit committee and the external auditors. The Audit Committee and external auditors. Present fairly yep, to be presented to council for adoption. Number 2, that the certification be signed by Henry and me. The independence be received and noted. And is that due at the moment, Juliana? Has that been sent by Tim? Do you know the signed independence certificate?
I'm happy to send one any date from tomorrow. That's fine. I have a question about the management representation letter. I think it's good that you reviewed the letter during the audit committee meeting. However, can you have the letter signed, closed after the certification from council? Because there's some subsequent events that I would like the covered for the subsequent events section to cover 3rd of June until the date, until the certification of the financial. So yeah, is that okay? Okay, no worries. Because a couple of councils like Adelaide Hills and Charles started to ask, can you send us the management representation letter? And I think they were not really good in explaining to us that the letter was just to be reviewed by the audit committee. I think they gave us the impression that it needs to be signed to the audit committee. So yeah, just if that's okay to sign for that to be signed after we get the certification from council. Okay, good.
So Henry's already signed that one, but it'll go through council as well as part of the statements. And then for me to sign the independence certificate. So we've got a 5-part resolution here, recommendation. Someone to move that way. Thanks, Karen. Seconded, Natalie. All in favour? Okay, Carrie, thank you. Now, 6.2 is the 2020 on financial performance summary report. So this is a standard report that's provided just from management in relation to the performance based on the financials. So Lakesh, over to you if you want to say anything.
Thank you. So through the chair, this is the report that Paul has prepared. And basically it is divided into 2 summaries. One is financial performance summary and one is non-financial performance indicators. So what it does, it compares the results for the 2 financial years, that is 2020-21 to 2019-20 actual results. And then it talks about the variations where the amounts have varied. So there is a fairly detailed explanations on where there has been variations in revenue, in expenses. But overall, like we have done much better from the last financial year in regards to, we had a deficit of about 255K last year, whereas we are looking for a surplus this year of 233K. So the report is very detailed. I'm happy to take any questions if there are. And yeah.
Right. Thank you, Lakesh. Open it up for questions from the committee. Peter, your hand's up. Can you hear us, Peter? Oh, you got your mic off, we think.
Yeah, I got my mic off. Sorry. I'll start again. Yes, about Norma again, just on the page 9, it talks about Norma's fairly radical shift from a deficit position to a surplus position. And I just wondered what the story was behind that fairly sharp move.
It was to do with the world commodity markets with recyclables. Norma actually was able to, because it produces high quality recycled material, it was able to sell that into the Asian market.
Right.
That was the main reason.
Very good. Okay.
So so that the value of the recyclables has gone up.
Yeah. Okay. Very fortuitous. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this report? I think it's a very straightforward report that Paul puts together every year for us. And I think if Paul said he might even be online. If you're there, Paul, well done.
Yes, well done, Mr. Howard.
Spying.
Okay, then we've got a recommendation that we recommend to council that the financial performance summary report be received. Thanks, Karen. Seconded. Natalie, all in favour? Okay. 6.3 is the 21-22 first quarter budget review, and I think Lakesh sent something out to all of us.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So I just sent a presentation which I would like to present. So, so the process that we have looked into for this first quarter budget review is majorly like we have got our end of financial year result. So I'm just like, this is not in the presentation. This is like what was our focus basically. So the focus for this first quarter budget review has been making sure that all the end of year financial figures are taken in consideration for the carried forward of capital, or, you know, like we know that how much is, if our funding contracts have been received now, so what is the funding there? So we haven't compared the actual with budgets in the first quarter budget review because it is too early into the financial year. And that exercise would be done in the second quarter budget review in December. So that hasn't been done. And overall, like if I can talk on my presentation, I have put majorly 11 slides into it and summarized what has happened in the first quarter budget review. Are you putting the presentation? Yeah, I want to speak. Is it all right? Just present
Your presentation, your paper.
I'll just open it quickly as well because.
You can just talk to that because are you saying you've got it all there? Yep. Okay. Well, yeah. Do you want to just talk through yours? Everyone's got it on the screen. Yep. So over to you, Lakesh.
Thank you. So the first quarter budget review, basically like the second page is the index. Index talks about what is in this presentation, fundamentals, what we have revised. The third page is why are we doing this budget amendment? So it's requirement of the local government financial management regulation. It requires us to at least amend our budget twice, but we are doing it 3 times a year. So we are well exceeding what's required compliance wise. Then there is a snapshot on page number 4, which talks about what was the things when we adopted the budget and how it looks with the draft budget review. So the key messages there are that we have increased our income by 178K. The expenses have also increased on the other side by 325K. There is a decrease in projected surplus because our expenses have increased more than our income. So we were projecting about 292,000 when we started the year, whereas now we are at a 145,000 mark in our surplus. Now I have explained in future slides that why there is a variance in income, expenses, capital. So that is our major message. Increase in debt level by 302,000. And that's mostly like because previously we were going to get a grant for 500,000 for our LED lighting conversion, whereas now we are not receiving it. So we would be using council's fund for that. So that's going to impact our debt levels. So next one is a bit more detailed on operating income and expense movements. So yep.
Finances have fallen over. No.
Yeah.
We wanted to come the other way. We want finances to raise.
Yep. Next time. So then operating income and expenses. So this slides basically talks about the different categories that we have in our income. So we got rates, grants, user charges, statutory charges, reimbursement. And like as you see in the column where it talks about the arrows. So basically anything arrowing up is increase. If it's green, like it's good. So in general income side, if there is increase in income, say for example, like grants and subsidies have increased by $80,000. So it's green arrows upward. Whereas if in expenses, there is a arrow upward. So that means we are also increasing the expense on the other side. So there overall, like there is an increase of 178K in income, and then about 325,000 in expenses. So therefore, like there is a decrease in our surplus of about 146K. So the next slide talks about income variances and where they are. So basically, like as highlighted before, 178K, where they are, 178K is 80,000 increase in financial assistance grant. Then we have got increase in statutory charges. So we have received more development applications. So that's about 20K. Then there is additional income we received for COVID-19. So then we received additional income for COVID-19, which is about 50K for apprenticeship program. And then the bank guarantee interest and fees charged refunded about 28K. So those four elements contribute toward 178K increase. The next slide talks about the expense variances. So why we have increased our expense. So majorly, like, there are three major factors: increase in employee cost by 25K. And what has happened there was the project for Carbethan Reserve where everything was capitalized for this, for the employee who is working on that project. Now that project is going to be completed in 2 financial years. So we have to transfer a bit of salary from capital to operating. So that's just shift of transfers. Material and contract expense is a major category where the major expense has happened. And the reason for that is 67,000 out of which has already been approved by council within first 3 months. Then 126K is transfer from capital to operating to be compliant with the policy. So what has happened is in the past, we have been capitalizing our crack sealing and road patching program. Like whatever expense we are doing in that regard, we have been capitalizing that, but through our system improvements, we have discovered that that should be operational and to be compliant with our capitalization policy. That's what we have started doing. So that 126K is majorly transfer from capital to operating. 38K is for asset master consultancy work. And that was picked by the asset management audit that happened through Bentley's. And because like we have got open different categories of assets that are not in our asset masters. So we need this immediate money to hire somebody to put those assets into asset masters. And the third category where the increased expenditure is on building depreciation. And that's mostly because we have got our building revalued as of 30th of June. That increased our prices for the buildings, and that has resulted in increased depreciation, which has now been incorporated in the next year's budget. So that's our increase in expenses. Capital expense variance. So that majorly talks about the capital expenses and where there have been variance. So majorly, like with capital expenses, there is 229,000 which we have increased. And this is mostly coming from the carried forward projects from 2020-21. As I have touched before, that now we have done our end of year finalization. We know exactly in what projects, what are we going to carry forward. And this is the $229,000, which we were projecting that we are going to complete in 2020-21, but we couldn't do it. So we have simply carried it forward into the next financial year. Yes.
So what's the other location? What makes up other?
So the other category includes playgrounds, IT projects, street assets, bridges, open spaces.
Because that's more organized.
Yes. 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 So the next one is the financial analysis, financial indicators. So basically, like I understand, like, we started from 0.87 of the adopted budget, but then We are now at 0.43. It has dropped, but we are still within our council policy targets, which is 0 to 10%. Ideally, you know, like we would like this to increase more, but at this stage it's 0.43. Net financial liabilities ratio, which was 93.2 when we started. With the first quarter budget amendment, we are looking at 91.4. So that's good. And it's still within our financial policy targets. So that's a take. Asset sustainability ratio, 143% when we started, still 143%. That exceeds our policy target. So that's good.
Karen, yeah.
Is that because there's been you've taken out a couple of $1 million and taken it to the next financial year?
Yes.
So it's sort of it's not a real number then, is it?
But at least like for 2021-22, what it has done, it has decreased the actual asset sustainability ratio as of 2021, but it has actually increased the budgeted asset sustainability ratio for 30th of June 2022, because we would be doing more asset works this financial year.
Yeah, Lakesh, just the net financial liabilities ratio. Was there a typo in here? Because I thought I read 81, but that must be a typo somewhere. Is that sustainable? The fact that we'll keep on dropping that down, or was that been because of COVID? I mean, all this extra money we got for COVID. Is it sustainable that we're going to keep on dropping it down?
Yep. So net financial liabilities ratio.
Is it 91% now?
Yep. So that's good.
I know it's fantastic, but it'll continue. It wasn't just a one-off because of COVID payments or anything like that.
Yes.
That's why. So it could go back up again.
It can go back again
Okay.
if council wants to invest more money and we need more projects. So that means like the borrowings is going to go up, and that means the financial liability ratio is going to go up.
I mean, this ratio always, I don't know, I always look at the situation, 0 to 100. What does it actually say? So, and you would say, what Lakesh said, you get money in, you would pay off your debts, it goes down. Then also you want to build projects, it goes up. So that's to me, it's a meaningless target. When you have something from 0 to 100, it just says, so you can do anything during the year and it can go from between 0 and 100 and you're always within policy target. I mean, a good.
On this net financial liabilities ratio, I agree with the chair. I really think, and it's not mentioned anywhere in this report, that our net debt is not mentioned at all. And the fact that we've actually funded a lot of our projects through borrowings, which is not mentioned here at all. And that level is something that we have in other reports sort of, but so yeah, I'm skeptical about the net financial liabilities ratio. I think it actually shows our ability to borrow and where we are in that range, but it doesn't actually show our borrowings at all. So I'd actually like to see as a financial indicator. I mean, it's not something you measure up or down, but it just, I think it sort of hopefully will sort of help sort of with setting budgets and things like that. But this is our debt at the moment, and to fund any other work we need.
Dave, I think once a year we do get the Treasury report that tells us the exact levels of both your funding, your debt, investment, the whole lot. That's something that comes through us every year. But again, if you are getting something through your council, you'll get regular debt reports for them. That should be coming to this committee as well.
I just don't think it's in front of people's or councillors' minds. That debt level.
Well, David, you're a councillor.
Yeah.
You want something, you ask for it.
Well, I can read financial statements. I've done a lot of subjects in accounting and everything else. But yeah, I just don't think that that's something that comes out through the net financial liabilities ratio or in this report at all. So I'd really like to see the debt, and I think a lot of councillors do it. So I think it's important.
Prior to COVID and prior to the support package being put in, there was a strategy put forward to manage debt, and there were 3 options put forward, and I think that's been presented over the last couple of years as part of budget deliberations. Will we be getting them again so that we can get back on track as far as debt management goes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we will be doing that in the council elected members workshop on the 15th of December. So we would be going through the figures and, like I have seen the last year what Paul has done in regards to the workshop where he gives three scenarios where, like the debt position, like how much income are we generate with percentage increases of rates and all. So that's what I think like you're asking about. So this.
Yep, Henry.
Yes, the information would be presented. Yes, it's clear on my radar relative to the long-term financial plan, our debt position, the fact that the long-term financial plan is structured with the intent of investing in the next iconic project in, I think it's year 5 and year 6. A couple of years ago, as the mayor's mentioned, we actually structured the budget with a couple of scenarios, reduced debt by 1 million, reduced debt by 2 million, and then the intent for that to be implemented, but then we had the COVID. So we're going back to those measures relative to being a driving factor in the considerations of the budget for 22-23. Now, whether we can present that, I don't think we'll be presenting the details of that at the December workshop, but certainly the clear parameters that then we'll be going through the details relative to structuring the draft budget for the new year's consideration. And I also take the point from Councillor Hughes in terms of, and what I take from your comments, David, is that when we do present reports that involve, potential expenditure of a material nature, that we need to make it clearer that on an ongoing basis, well, our current level of debt is $25 million. This proposal would result in an increase in loans of, $500,000 or $1 million, and that would result in our debt increasing and our sort of interest rates repayments increase. So it's just clear as mud. Well, no, clear as day. Sorry, clear as day. Not clear as mud, clear as day.
There have been reports that have made that very clear. Not all reports, but certainly there's been reports which said blah, blah, blah. This is the impact. And given the local government reforms, I think at our recent workshop with Norman Waterhouse, there was a suggestion put forward that in all reports, you identify the role of local government and function of local government and how they've added, we must take into consideration the financial impact and have that in report, and have we addressed that when we're making those types of decisions. And I think that's actually a really good way to keep us on task, to reflect back on the new legislation and our role and what we're supposed to be doing.
Thanks, Henry. Rakesh, did you?
So thank you. And like with Councillor Yu's question about borrowings and all. So this presentation is just a mere presentation on the figures that we have presented, and the actual report do have the statutory financial statements which are projected, and it also talks about the debt levels, what's going to be there at the end of the June if we go with the first quarter budget review. But I totally understand there should be a report with the existing loans, if not at least quarterly with the budget reviews. So we can take that on board, and maybe with the next budget quarter review, we can put that in there. But yeah, with my presentation, I think that's about it. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rakesh. I think we've been taking questions as we've gone along. So anything, Peter, anything from you?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Right, so David's happy to move that recommendation. And second one, Natalie, all in favour? That's 6.4. It's the risk management. 3-year audit plan progress update. Nathan, is that you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we've been actually fairly busy over the last couple of months. 4 audits have been conducted. One of the bigger ones was the local government risk services audit that's broken into 5 key areas. So that was conducted by a desktop in the first couple of weeks of September, and then on site. At the end of September, we received back a draft summary report. We've replied, and I believe we only just today or yesterday received the final report from them. So that will be presented at the next audit committee meeting. We've also had Bentley's have conducted the PDI Act audit, which has been finished. We're just awaiting their report to come back. And again, Bentley's will be attending the next audit committee to present their findings in the PDI Act. The guidelines of safe pool operations, we put one in here. It wasn't identified in our 3-year audit plan, but it is a critical audit that the Erin Finlay, manager of recreation, I've got the wrong manager, anyway, manager of the pool would like done to ensure compliance against the GSPO. So that one, yeah, was conducted as well. Yeah, basically we've just been, yeah, quite busy. The business continuity and IT disaster recovery audit was scheduled to have occurred over the last couple of months. However, due to an upgrade of recovery, we are changing the way that we're looking after our IT in an emergency scenario. So our backup site will be at your DC, and it was decided to postpone that. Your DC.
Through the chair, your DC is a data warehouse at Edinburgh Parks. So our disaster recovery site is moving from Evanston Gardens Community Centre to that data warehouse. So we decided to postpone the audit so that we were auditing on the new system, not on a system that was being replaced within a few weeks.
Can we use proper names and not acronyms so we understand? Because I don't understand some of this terminology. So if that can be, you know, proper wording so we all understand. Thank you.
No, that's pretty much what we're working towards. So at the next audit committee, Bentley's will be presenting 2 final audit reports, which will be the PDI Act review and also the business continuity and IT disaster recovery audit. Yes, they'll be on site presenting those ones. And then the delivery of audits for next year, we'll be doing a request for quote to undertake those services.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the guidelines for the safe pool operations. Didn't we change our operations and need permission to change the number of water changes or something? So with the health department or something? So I'm just wondering how that fits in with this.
So the GSPO doesn't actually look at that one element of the water turnover rate, but it's actually broken into 8 different elements, which is around signage, your policies, procedures, the training, facility design, in regards to electrical connections, your ladders, your that sort of thing. It doesn't actually look at the water turnover rate, because that's, yeah, it doesn't look at that. It looks at the actual functioning, the staff, the training, those sort of elements.
I'm not sure if you covered this, Nathan, cybersecurity assessment and project management framework. When will that be actioned?
So So the cybersecurity audit, we're just waiting for our the upgrade of our IT services, and then once we've got that new systems implemented, then we'll be conducting the cybersecurity audit. That one is actually fairly easy to undertake. It's all done remotely, so there's very little staff time usage. The project management framework is scheduled for February next year, which is why we need to get the acquisition plan out to actually engage a suitable provider to undertake those audits that are identified for, yeah. We'll be waiting for our service to be updated, so we'll probably do the business continuity IT disaster recovery audit first, and then as soon as that's done early next year, we'll be doing the,
Sorry, Peter, anything from you from the audit plan?
No, I'm quite happy with it. Thank you.
Thanks. Nathan, just, and again, so that action list, I think that's a good format that you put forward from, so all the internal audits, the action lists, and again, I think we need to have a similar one, and it might be the finance team, given it's the external audit findings, both from the interim visit and the external, so recommendations in a very similar format. What's found, who's going to do what, you know, who by when, and so forth, and the progress. I think this format should also should be done for the external audit. My question, and I'll put this to Henry, is Henry, I think that if any of these due dates are not met, I think they need to come and seek your permission for them to extend, and they've got to give you a good enough reason as to why a certain recommendation that they've said was going to be done by March 22 now has to be pushed out to September 22. I think that's a good accountability from them. So they've got to think hard. And it's not because too often you just see things going on, and we just extend and extend because it just keeps going back to a committee and they say, yeah, no problem. So I think if it comes back through to you, and if you make that a directive to the staff, these people that are reported on here, that if you want an extension, you've got to give me a good enough reason why I'm going to approve it. Thank you. So any other questions from Nathan's report? If not, we have a recommendation here that we recommend council that through the audit plan progress update report being noted. Thanks, Natalie. Seconded. David, thank you. I'm waiting for Peter to put his hand up, but I keep looking over Nathan's order, but it still hasn't come through yet. So all in favour? Okay, thank you. Okay, Nathan, you're on again. Risk management update.
Thanks very much for that. So as you know, we had a workshop, probably would have been a month ago now, which was sort of the prelude on an overview of Council's risk management framework, and also discussing about risk appetite, risk tolerance levels. So what we'll be doing is going out in the next week for an RFQ to get a provider in to develop and assist Council in developing a risk appetite, risk tolerance levels, and also conducts workshops at different tiers of knowledge for executive, for audit committee, council, but then also a general awareness training for staff. So yeah, basically in the next week, we'll be going out for an RFQ for that. Sorry, request for quote. Yes, acronym, my bad. I talk fast, so I.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So these have just came out from our audit work plan. So these policies are periodically up for renewal. And I have made like the changes, say for example, like in regards to the depreciation policy, there was a definition for assets missing from that policy. So I have just put that definition in. Other than that, nothing much has changed. Funding policy, nothing has changed. Rates, financial hardship policy, there was a special clause inserted for COVID-19. and like the relief which was available according to that in that policy. So what I have done is simply remove the COVID clause in there and have inserted a pandemic event clause, and so that it becomes a little bit more generic. And then, like based on the severity of that event, council is going to determine what sort of relief is available. So just covering pandemic, but not specifying what is provided for. So yeah, other than that, it's very straightforward, and the recommendation is that council, that audit committee recommends that council adopt following policies.
Sorry, Peter, you got your hand up?
Yep, sorry, I can't hear terribly well. Just a couple of comments. One is on the depreciation policy. I asked myself really why we need this policy at all, because it seems just repeat information, which is really part of the standards, which have got to be complied with anyway. And by having a policy that also talks about the same things, you end up in a position with inconsistency sometimes when one document's changed and another one has to be, so to speak. And there's a potential for mix up, and also it's terribly inefficient to have to do this. So I just wonder whether we really need this as a policy when it doesn't really cover anything that's not in the standards as it is.
Just following on for that, how often do staff use this policy?
So talking about the depreciation policy.
Yeah.
So I think like what we follow is we follow the AASB guidelines, AASB 16, when we imply the depreciation on a quarterly basis.
Well, I wouldn't be suggesting that we don't use the policy, but I certainly hear from the members, and I'm happy to take on notice the consequences of if we were to look at removing the policy, but I wouldn't want at this particular point to not endorse the policy, but take on note, and let's be clear, if we are replicating standards, then we would otherwise not pursue the policy, but I'm not quite ready to make that call right yet.
And could you go in between and whenever it's like the wording's repeated from the standard, just refer to the standard. So therefore you're not having to update the standard changes. You don't have to update it, but then you still technically have a policy.
So can I? No, okay, can I give another solution? So we have a fixed and intangible asset policy, which you'll have an asset policy. My early comment about do you also have to think about including intangible assets, update that, and within that policy is a section on depreciation and amortization, which refers directly to the standard. How simple is that? I think that's what we're saying. So as the standard gets updated, you read that policy and says, oh, I've got to go to AAS, and you go to the standard. So maybe that's something that you can look at, is, just maybe incorporate that into your asset policy and have a section they call depreciation and make reference to the standard. Oh yeah, well, I hope so. That's the biggest thing on your books. So Henry, so to your comment there, so you don't want us to, I mean, if you want to, I mean, we could, again, made the recommendation is to look at incorporating the depreciation policy into the asset policy and doing away with it. Again, if it makes it.
Well, I think we should take it out of being adopted and have a separate dot point in regard to what you just said.
Yeah, correct.
To consideration be given to incorporating depreciation into the existing depreciation policy into the asset.
Existing asset policy.
Yeah, and
so we'll adopt the funding, rates, hardship, and resource sharing.
Yeah, and take out depreciation and put a separate dot point.
Depreciation.
Yeah,
so we want to capture that in the
consideration be made to.
So take that one. So 2, 3, and 4 becomes 1, 2, and 3. And then, well, not consider, I think we say, you know, the audit committee recommends that the depreciation policy be incorporated into the asset policy
But
with
I'm,
reference to the relevant accounting standards.
I heard from the CEO that he wasn't quite ready to do anything about the depreciation policy yet. Review it, yeah. So
Okay, that the depreciation be reviewed. The depreciation policy be reviewed for incorporation into the asset policy.
yeah, for potential incorporation. Yeah. That way it gives administration an opportunity to bring it back as a combined policy.
The
And
assets,
it gives-
assets policy.
And it picks up on the CEO's sort of hesitancy of not wanting to do it now without discussing with his team. If I've got that correct. Yeah.
So it's ISSETS.
Too many S's.
No, ISS.
Sometimes you look at it too much.
So through the chair, if I could just,
So take that's it. Beautiful. Thank you.
sorry, through the chair, I think Mayor Redmond suggested that we move with the current motion A, B and C, or 1, 2 and 3,
1, 2,
and then
3.
have a separate motion moved and seconded regarding the review.
Correct. Yes. So the audit committee recommends to council. So
Peter?
sorry, Peter.
Sorry, I got everybody's back to me. Like I'm happy with that. I think it just my point is don't create work where none is needed. It does take time, and someone has to manage it and so on. So that's I'm happy for that to be reviewed and to be done in Henry's good time. I did have another point in relation to the rates financial hardship policy, which has got a clause in there about future pandemics. And I just wonder whether that's necessary as well, because by their nature, they don't come around that often, hopefully. And what's left in there is that council will do something, and it may be that council will not want to do something. I can imagine that when you come to another pandemic, it'd be a totally different situation, and the policy really, by having something in there which is just very notional, is not really very meaningful, and you might as well not have it in there. That's my point, just keep things as brief as possible. So that's my only other comment.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, and I have that same comment that if we were going to include anything about a pandemic, that it actually include a pandemic that's declared by the WHO. That's when it becomes a pandemic. It's not just a pandemic if Stephen Marshall decides to call it a pandemic. That's what I'm saying. No, even he doesn't call it a pandemic. He might like to. So what I'm saying, yeah, and look, I agree with Peter. So this was put in there because of the COVID. I think we just take it out and don't make reference to a future pandemics or whatever. It's again, it'll be up to council to make a decision as to how they're going to apply their hardships policy.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether this one's over yet, though, just seeing the state response to the borders opening. This is going to go on for another year. I went to a conference and one of the organisations has factored in that 10% of their workforce at any one time will be off next year because everyone's probably sick, they won't be able to attend work. So I think you've still got that classifies hardship if people can't work a job because they're very sick and they've got long-term COVID. So I don't think we should completely.
But does it have to be, the question being is that this is an extraordinary provision. Why does it just have to be COVID? What I think Peter's saying remove.
Chair, if I could, that's exactly how it's being reworded. It was COVID specific, and now it's just pandemic general. So it provides a broader flexibility.
If I can, Natalie's right, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be like that. We're going to have crescendos and depressions and surges. It's the modelling. If you look at the modelling, there will still be people that will get COVID. With immunisation, of course, you'll be far better off, and with the third dose, which is coming as of December, you'll be far better off. So the trouble with modelling is it's modelling. And it depends on the nature and what they've included in the modelling. And so we have to look at other countries like Israel and elsewhere. Israel is probably one of the better countries that are managing it. They're still getting surges, but you'll find that in Australia, we're probably going to do better, and that's the thinking. We're going to do better because we're more compliant, we get more testing done, etc. So our accuracy will be superior, and I think our health system won't be under so much stress. So 10% of people, you're still going to have people off with minor illness, not major illness, but they'll still be off. So,
but my question being then, if you're going to make this as a statement, a policy statement, you're going to provide this relief when this happens, are you going to put a provision aside on that modelling that it's going to come and go? Because that needs to be built into your long-term financial, because if you look at 3 years ago, you didn't predict you were going to have to.
no,
How much did you fork out for that? Was it
nearly three.
how much?
3 million.
3 million? Well, there you go. So if that happens in 2025, are you going to make a provision for it? Because you've got a policy statement here.
Good question. Oh, that's fine.
Because what's coming to is that more and more organisations will mandate vaccination. So you're going to have people that will lose their job if they refuse to be vaccinated. That's a big reality.
And again,
Sorry, I can't hear anything. Has Natalie got her microphone on?
Can you hear it, Peter?
Can you hear me?
I can hear now. Yes, I just couldn't hear what you were saying, Natalie. Sorry.
There's some, it looks like some organisations will mandate people being fully vaccinated. So those people that don't believe in being immunised won't be able to work.
Yeah.
And does council take a stance on that?
Through the chair, we're certainly waiting on direction from the LGA to be consistent from a sector-wide perspective. But no, I'm not hearing any messaging that we're at that point or near to it at this stage.
The questions to think about. So do we keep this in as we're saying, just leave it, but can we make this thing about a pandemic event? And
So
are we saying
what
declare?
it says is, in recognition of the hardship facing the broader community due to the pandemic event, well, it might be due to a potential pandemic event, council will endeavour to provide financial relief to affected ratepayers within the town of Bulla. The financial assistance will vary based on severity of the event, and the policy will be reviewed accordingly.
But are we saying, again, I ask my question, are we saying declared by who? Who declares this event? Are we going, the time that COVID was declared, everyone still was running till the WHO came in, World Health Organization said, we are now declaring this as a pandemic and an emergency event.
March 2020.
Okay,
Yeah,
so all I'm saying is, do we need to put on there declared by WHO?
we could.
Can you do it to the SA state government? You know,
But they'll do it based on.
yeah,
who's-
so you're going to go up to who? Or we better go, because I know like the government agencies, you know how they do it, yes.
Well, let's find the right wording and put that in there, Kesh. So emergency.
It's commissioner, you know, it's great
Yeah,
service,
that's
I think. Yeah.
Paul, sorry.
I've just got a question for Natalie. So when you're saying people get COVID and they can't work, are you saying that we would be responsible because they don't have they don't want to take the vaccines, so they can't work? So then that's a hardship.
Well,
So-
yeah, this is the definitions you have to put in.
Yeah, is that what you're saying? That
We're going to have, I mean, it's like the UK, they're doing okay. It's like you talk to someone we've got conference calls with people in the UK and they've got like a flu and they go, sorry, I'm sniffing, I've got COVID. We're kind of like, wow. But it's just, people will be off work now, you know, if they're on extended leave and they've used up all their sick leave. Yeah, it's just
So
going
they
to be
can't
an
pay their
issue.
rates, so they'll come back and say, we're, you know, going through your hardship policy, that we get some.
But isn't that covered by other aspects of the hardship policy? If it's applicable?
The jab thing is if with the organisation saying that it's mandated, you don't have a job if you're not vaccinated.
But they're not sick, they just can't go to work.
But some people are really,
Correct, but it's their
Yeah.
choice. So again, this is the question I'm saying. No, it's council to deliberate that, Paul. It's not your hardship. I keep saying you're a board of directors. Board of directors do these type of things. That's what it's about. It's good.
So through the chair, if I could, I think we're talking about two different parts here. One is an internal management issue about COVID and staff and leave entitlements, where this is looking about community hardship and ability to pay rates or otherwise. So from the conversation, I'm taking that paragraph that we would introduce, say, after the pandemic event, you know, as declared by as declared by the state government.
Yep. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yep, because they're going to take their advice from who?
Yeah.
Yep. So then can we have in the recommendation, just under the rates financial hardship in brackets as amended? I think Lakesh has captured it and so has Henry, so we'll know what they need to update.
So is it like as simple as in recognition of the hardship facing the broader community due to a pandemic being declared by the state
SA
government?
government, South Australian government.
Yep, declared by South
South
Australian
Australian
government. Thank you.
And then the second part of that resolution will be that the audit committee recommends to council that the following policy be reviewed, and then we put on there number 4. So that's no, leave that one as it was. So just cut and paste that line underneath 3 that the audit committee recommends. So it's a 2-part recommendation. We're going to have the audit committee recommends those 3 be adopted. And then the next one, that the audit committee recommends to council that the following policy, PLOCYB, be reviewed. And then you put depreciation. No, that'll be either number 3 or you can make it number 1 or 4 underneath, and then put depreciation. Because the policy is the depreciation policy. Oh, sorry, hang on, you've already captured it down there. Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you had that there. Sorry, my apology, you can take that bit out, my apologies. Yeah. So take that whole thing out, officer's recommendation, and put it underneath 3. Beautiful. Oh, you got one more? Sorry. Yep. Okay.
I don't want to get shot though. So seeing as we're swimming around in the assets policy, is there a clause on the gifted assets? You know how we got into the trouble from the road that was coming DIT? Is there something in the assets policy around treatment of the gifted assets and what to do in that circumstance, just to try and have a lessons learned exercise and not
I think there is on you know, of assets received free of charge. Isn't that in that assets policy?
Just want to check. Just just to help out in case it happens again. You always want to learn, and obviously it needs time and preparation. Whether you can help that through, like, just a reminder that, oh, we've got this gifted asset coming, we should probably.
Okay, we're happy with that then. So someone to move that two-part recommendation. Thank you, Paul. Seconded, Karen. All in favour? Carried. Okay, 6.7, our Audit Committee Work Plan Progress Report. Any questions on that report? I think we're going on track. Nothing's slipped so far. So everyone happy with that?
Happy to move that.
Thank you, Peter. Seconded, David. All in favour? Okay, carried. You'll capture that, ladies? Peter and David. Now we've got the audit plan. So now we've done 6.7, we're up to 6.8, the Audit Committee Annual Report. This is just capturing our last 12 months activities for the last financial year. Any comments on that? No, any changes? Sorry, Henry.
Further to the earlier conversation about, having policies for the sake of having policies and having reports for the sake of having reports, the council will at the November meeting be receiving reports on terms of reference of its various committees. And I just wanted to get a gauge from this committee whether, this sort of annual report is of any value or not.
Well, it's not for, well, again, Henry, it's not of value to this committee. It's whether council wants to know what this committee has done, because apart from the mayor and the other two councillors that are here, I know there's a lot of other councillors. Do they even know what we do? Well, and again, if they don't believe that this is a value-adding report, take it away, because it involves management's time, involves my time in putting my bid in. I know they send it through to me to finalise it. If they're not want to use it, but again, I'll leave it up to council to make that call.
I think it's a valuable report. I know that it takes a lot of time and it's stating what the committee does, and you can read the committee agendas, but an annual report encapsulates it all into one report. And I think previously there have been councillors who said we like that annual report and knowing what is happening. So from my point of view, I think that it does help other councillors who don't sit on this committee to understand the volume of work. That's quite a bit of work that this committee is doing. And given the local government reforms, this committee is even more important. I know that you're cutting the elected members. I think that's a real shame because I think elected members learn a lot when they're on this committee. But that's not being valued so by the powers that be. So yeah, so I think an annual report's really important, and going forward, I think it'll be even more important.
Okay, so we've got a recommendation. Received and noted. Somebody that way. Thanks, Natalie. Seconded, Karen. All in favour?
Council now has a policy where we have en bloc decisions for information reports. Has that been fed through to you as chair, that we can, for information reports only, can be moved en bloc under our policy?
No. But again, that's the way we want to do it. I'm happy for that to do it as well.
Thank you.
So again, I'll leave it to whoever's putting the agenda together, do that, and then just let me know that this is the process, and we'll go through that. And well, and look, I remember there used to be, when I first started with Charles Sturt, they actually used to do what they call starred and unstarred items. So the ones you starred is the ones that you wanted to read, and the unstarred was just approved in block. So usually, there'd be 12 reports. I'll start 3 or 4, and the other 8 are just virtually approved, and that's how it's minuted. So can be done. Okay, now the 6.9 is our annual self-assessment survey. So I think we're just asking, the question is, are we happy with the questions and the format? So they'll send it out to us with a view of it being presented at our next meeting with the results. Is that correct? Is that how I'll read this, Rakesh?
Yes, through the chair. So this is audit committee self-assessment survey. So this has come out of the term of reference, and then the questions have been prepared based on those terms of reference and how much have we achieved. And it's just like a self-evaluation of the audit committee itself. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, look, if I can make one recommendation, can I have management incorporate this into a Survey Monkey tool? It's happening with all the other audit committees. It just cuts out same as administration for administration. So it's the initial capture of this on a Survey Monkey with these exact scales, send it out to the committee members. We do it online, send, and then you can cut and paste and give us the results in pie charts and whatever you want to do. I think, and once you've set that up, it becomes easy. So can that be done, please, for this survey to be sent out? Does anyone want any of the question sets changed or Rakesh has indicated it's coming? Peter, yes?
Yeah, I think the wording, the questions and the response need to be configured better, because it asks, does you or do you agree with that? And then it gives I haven't got it in front of me, but the response doesn't fit with the question, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Anybody notice that?
Yep. In some of the ones, yes.
Have a look at the first question.
So rather you just start with, you know, the audit committee contributes to the reviewing of providing strongly agree. So how well, because if you're saying how well, so if you're saying how well, you want to say very well, you know, well, not so well. So that's, but given we're doing everything with the agree or don't agree, just take out asking how. Change, removing out the how wells to just starting with the audit committee. Thank you, Peter, for that.
Okay.
Thank you. So then the question is, we note that the audit committee self-assessment survey in brackets as amended. And that the self-assessment survey be provided to the audit committee members through a survey using. Do we want to capture that, or do we just know that management will do that through this year? Okay, with the results presented at the next audit committee meeting. That's recommendation. Someone move second. Thanks, Natalie. Seconded David. All in favour? Okay, carried. Okay, 6 to 10 is the statute amendment. Update to the review of the Act. So what's the state of play now? Rakesh, is someone want to?
So Kate can help with this while she's here. Thanks, Kate.
So this report was just to bring to the attention to the audit committee some of the current round 2 regulations that are out for consultation. We have provided them to council as well to seek any feedback, and we've attached obviously the LGA position paper on that as well. So any feedback from the committee would be appreciated, and we can incorporate that in the overarching response from council.
Responses have been good so far. My only question is that I know we're going to be called the Audit and Risk Committee, and I've noticed some councillors have already started changing that. I mean, I don't know if you have to wait for a date. Is that something they'll have contemplated changing, say from 2022 to actually call an audit and risk committee.
I don't think that's something we've specifically turned our mind to, even in regards to the timing. We're required for the terms of reference, obviously, to incorporate audit and risk. There has been a range of titles throughout the sector for even the current audit committees, some common corporate governance, etc. So the terms of reference to ensure that we're incorporating all the requirements. But if the committee has a preference to change that title, we can do it at the November meeting when we do consider the appointments and the terms of reference. We can do it this month if the preference is there. Do you think we can incorporate that in November council meeting?
Okay, any other comments we want to provide back to, so when's that heading back?
The feedback is following the November council meeting, so I think it's around the 26th or 28th of November.
And is that as late as you want any other feedback at a session or? No, sorry.
Looking at the LGA discussion paper, page 7, page 323 of our attachments, and it is in regard to the makeup of the Audit and Risk Committee. Current regulation, this regulation previously required council audit committees to have at least one member who is not a member of the council. Section of it now sets out the obligation that the majority of the members of the council or regional committee must be persons who are not council members and may not include employees of the council. It says here, I mean, my view is that I think it should be at least equal of elected members and independent members. And that's a compromise position. I think having elected members on this committee is quite valued. Any member who comes on takes away greater skill and greater understanding of the role of this committee, but also the importance of financial management, particularly traditionally financial management. And going forward, it will be a greater understanding around risk, which is not very well understood. So I know the government and the LGA are coming from a position of skill, but I'm coming from a position of empowerment and development of elected member role and capacity. And I think it's really important that we have at least equal members, not majority members, independent. That's my view. I don't know what anyone else thinks, and I'm keen to hear other people's views.
Good governance says you should have more independent than, and I take your point that you want this as an opportunity for training of council members, but there's a public gallery there that I don't see too many others sitting in at all of our meetings. There's an opportunity if they really want to come and learn and understand without having to pass resolutions. I mean, they can get copies of the papers if they want to, if they are that interested. Look, as I said, I think there's 5 maximum, with 3 and 2 is going to get through. How will Gawler then handle it? I mean, unless you ask the minister for exemption and say you want to have 6 members and make it equal, he might give you that exemption. That's I've got no problems as to to me, it's all going to come back, and that's why we do this self-assessment every year, is to just make sure that we've got the right skills sets and ability to provide advice back to council as an advisory committee. That's what we are. We don't make decisions, we advise. So. I think there's an improvement, Karen, from when I first started, where I know one council, they only had me. And it was just that committee was used more as a political gunfight. People wanted to get on there so they can get their points across before going to do council, and that's not what it's all about. But that's changed. No, I'm not saying here. No, I'm not. No, I agree. Because if I did, I wouldn't be sitting here.
If I can, local intelligence and local understanding of local issues is really, really important, and it's being devalued, it's being dismissed, and I think it's wrong. I think it's absolutely wrong. And I hear what you're saying. You're saying that good governance states that independent members by far provide better financial oversight, advice to council. But we're also talking about risk. And I can tell you over and over again that often risk is dealt with on a financial basis, and reputational risk, you're one of the few people that ever bring it up. Rarely is it brought it up, and yet that is one of the biggest risks any council faces, and it's rarely seen as an issue. And yet that is one of the biggest things that brings councils down. So, and that is often brought through by elected members. I don't agree. I think that there needs to be a presence of elected members on these committees, and my view is it should be. That's just my view.
And well, and Karen, and I think the thing about risk, as much as in this forum that we get a better understanding, but if we then talk about risk appetite, tolerance and maturity, I don't think a councillor needs to sit on this committee for them to really, I would, to me, what would be impressive is that yes, this committee talks about it, and as soon as that paper hits council, this councillor Sun will also looking at it and saying, yeah, well, the appetite and the tolerance, that would blow me away. But it doesn't have to be him being on this committee for him to learn and understand that. That's just his wanting to be professionally developed as a good councillor. That's a skill set that I believe all councillors should have, and they don't just get it from an audit and risk committee.
If I
Through,
the
so,
council assessment panel is now only has one elected member and a proxy, and I think it's I think that's a shame. I think that local intelligence has been a strength, and I think it's been stripped away from good planning decisions. And yeah, there's quite a bit of angst out there that that we're not being included in decisions and also advice to council. So look, we can agree to disagree, I think.
But with the planning, I mean, you'll have an override of that, don't you? I mean, if something comes up from your dad. Sorry, Peter.
through your chair. Look, I totally agree with the mayor. I think representation from council members on the audit committee is integral to its function, because they're the ones who sit on the council and have the capacity to argue and represent the audit committee. You get the minutes, but that doesn't necessarily always say everything. So it's important to have that dialogue between the audit committee and the board or the council to be represented there, in my view. And you don't find companies setting up audit committees and they exclude the board members. It's just not.
No, they don't exclude, but but all big companies and banks have more independent members than board members on their audit and risk.
Yep, but that's not the issue. I don't argue against that. I'm just arguing that there should be representation from the board or the council properly and realistically on the audit committee. I think
I agree. I totally agree with that. But I think what we're coming back to is the actual split. Should it be a majority of independent or majority, or as the mayor's pointed out, just actually have an equal number? But that can't happen with this 5 number that they're proposing. If they say of 6 people, it'll work out perfectly. We'll go with Karen's recommendation, 3 and 3, like we currently have. And
so
I think this works very well.
That's a choice that, yeah. Well, if that's
maybe that might be the feedback, Karen, that we have to provide, is that say that Gawler Council is very strong with expanding that number to 6 and having equal representation. Full stop. Well, why don't we put that down as our feedback? I'm happy to support that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're running with now, and it seems to be working quite well.
And also equally, as independents bring a certain view to the business of the committee, the councillors also bring their own value to it of what's happening on the local scene. So that's important for everybody to consider as well.
And I don't know why they wanted to have the odd number, because there's no votes that to be casted, and the chair has. We don't vote. We only, as I said, we make recommendations and we endorse things. We don't actually have authority to do anything but that.
Hmm.
Well, let's put it in the understanding paper that they want. Okay, thank you. That was good debate. Thank you. We captured that. Okay, so we've got a recommendation then that we note the update report and the round 2 regulations up for consultation. Someone to move that way. Thanks, Natalie. Seconded. David, all in favour? Carried. Yeah. Kate's capturing it. Update report as amended. As amended.
Should we state that in relation to the membership representation of the committee, audit committee?
Regulation number 8. Nine.
I don't think the word "not" should be there. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep. Okay.
Through the chair, given the importance of this issue, I think the resolution should be specific and say, note the feedback on member representation of the audit committee to comprise 3 council members and 3 independents.
Or maybe change the word. It must have between 3 and 6 members. And just leave it at that. Between 3 and 6 members. That will then leave it to individual councillors. Let them choose. See, the 5 is the one that's breaking it down at the moment, Henry. Because if it's 5, right, and they're saying it has to have a majority of independents, then one of the councillors has to leave this committee. Whereas you make it 6, everything stays as it is.
Or if it has to be an odd number, you could make it 7.
Oh, jeez. They'll have the whole council on here.
Well, if you want to break, if it becomes a voting issue, it's
Just say something out. I know there's another council that's got a similar issue and they're trying to work out the balance. I think your point, as long as, there's even or a majority independence, because that would solve, I don't think we're the only council that's got this problem and they've come up against it and they can't work out because they want a certain skill set with their independent members, but they can't get it because of the quota restrictions. Now, if you want 7, people on the audit risk committee, then you should be allowed to do it. It's up to judgment, but just to have that. So I would raise it and see what happens.
yeah.
But then we've got to let them know there's got to be over that 5 though. Because then if they say it's only up to 5 and it's equal numbers, then it's going to be 2 and 2. That's what we're saying. If they've capped it at 5 and you want equal numbers, then it has to be 2 and 2. So there's only 4 members of this committee. Whereas if you say, and raising the cap to 6, of equal number of council representative independent members and raising the cap to 6. That's it. Happy with that, Nat? So David, you moved it, or no, Natalie moved it. and you seconded. Are we happy with all of that? Okay, all in favour? So Natalie and David moved the second. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. And that's it. There's one more. We got the, oh yes, the deep, another acronym. Sorry, Karen. Don't blame me. The BRPG.
What acronyms do is they exclude people. And there are people listening who aren't au fait with accounting terms or other terms. And, it is really important to try and remove them if we can.
Do you get acronyms in your council reports?
I have asked previously not to have them in there.
Well, let's make a pact between you and me. You're the mayor and I'm the chair of this committee. We will not have any more acronyms, please. No more. Yep.
As per this report, we do refer to, we spell out the Barossa Regional Procurement Group and then we use the acronym and then from there on, we use the acronym. But am I hearing from this committee and the mayor that?
No, not all the way. I reckon if you have that first up explanation and then do it.
Is that okay? Because I'm, when I review the reports, I make sure that right at the beginning where we would otherwise have the acronym, it's broken, it's spelled out, and then thereafter it's otherwise used.
Yep.
So
That's standard convention.
But is everybody happy with that?
Yes. Okay. So, any questions on this report?
I just want about Adelaide Plains. Did they don't want to put any resources in, but they want to get some benefits. Is that right? Is that how I'm reading it?
Through the chair, no, not really. What the Adelaide, as we know, our friends from Barossa have pulled out in Mid-Murray, and we got to the point where we were reconfiguring the model with ourselves, Adelaide Plains and Light Regional. And as Adelaide Plains then were reassessing, they then advised, well, they need to have a dedicated resource, which then limited their capacity to. So that basically was the draw that broke the camel's back relative to the previous model. So we have all agreed to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, reduce everyone's commitment to the regional procurement model in terms of financials, but still collaborate. And so there's active intent to collaborate, particularly through ourselves, Adelaide Plains and Light Regional Council.
So that's just an annual cost, is it? That's going to 2,546 per council. So how much time was this admin person putting in? Wow.
The admin support pertains to the existing panel, the building maintenance panel, so it's very limited.
Oh, it's only when you'll meet on a bi-monthly basis.
It's not to provide admin support for when we meet, to take minutes and so on and so forth. It's as part of the previous Barossa Regional Procurement Group, we had a series of panels, and the last panel that we have is the building maintenance panel. We have arrangements with building companies that are involved in that panel, and we all agreed that we wanted to maintain that panel for the life of the current agreements, and that's for a couple of years, and this is the cost of maintaining that panel and the administrative resources applicable. So it's, minimal.
Through you, Chair, it seems like a pretty reasonable way to go, I think. And judging by what I've read, it's having some success already. And it leaves open the capability to engage more deeply with the partner councils if circumstances arise. So it's fairly minimal cost, yet has some of the benefits of a joint work in this area. So It seems pretty good to me.
Any further questions? Because we've got a three-part recommendation.
I think there's a sort of, there should be 4 parts. It should be part 1, the report be noted, get that report, part 2, that a regional procurement group continues to operate, and then point 2 becomes point 3 and point 3 becomes point 4.
Thank you, Henry. Yep. 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 Are we happy with that? 4-part recommendation. Someone to move, please. Thank you, Peter. Seconded, Paul. All in favour? Carried. I think that's all. We have our business. We've got no items listed for discussion, no questions without notice, no motions without notice. And officially close the meeting. Note that our next meeting is the 1st of February. So all I can say is pretty early wishing everyone a Merry Christmas, isn't it? 1st of November. See what COVID does to you?
And a Happy New Year.
Thank you all.
Very good. See you later, everyone.
Thank you, Peter. Hope
See you
you're
then.
feeling better and come back with a negative result.
Yeah, I should get that in the